imagine you're 17 years old and you have 103-degree fever, and after you're given antibiotics to treat it, you start experiencing excessive daytime sleepiness. You're not able to stay awake when doing your homework and studying for tests, and as a result, your grades begin to drop. A few months later, when you start laughing, you realize that your muscles are going weak and you're dropping to the ground. And you also notice that when you fall asleep and wake up, you're experiencing hallucinations. You go to many doctors and they diagnose you with epilepsy, schizophrenia, and depression. You're given the treatments for these, but there's no improvements. You then hear someone mention narcolepsy, and when you look into it, you realize that you have all of the symptoms of it. And when you go to your doctor and are treated for it, you experience improvement in your symptoms right away. So, though you are grateful for your diagnosis, why was this not the first thing that was thought of when you went to your doctors? Narcolepsy is a chronic neurological sleep disorder that is underdiagnosed, and according to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders, it occurs in about 135 to 200,000 people in the U.S. I personally can attest to this because I deal with narcolepsy every day. When I was 9, my parents realized that I wasn't as energetic as I used to be. I kept falling asleep, so they took me to the doctor, and after a lot of tests, I was diagnosed with narcolepsy. So to get a good picture of the various aspects of it, it's important to first explain what it is and how it's diagnosed, and then look at the various symptoms. So I'm going to begin by explaining the different tests that are required for a narcolepsy diagnosis. So the American Academy of Sleep Medicine recognizes that there are 2 types of narcolepsy. And the first one is narcolepsy with cataplexy, which is the most common, and as stated by Sleep Medicine Reviews, up to 60% of people with narcolepsy experience cataplexy. The Neurological Institution of Neurological Disorders categorizes cataplexy as a sudden loss of muscle tone or voluntary muscle control, and it's usually triggered by intense emotions such as laughter or being surprised by someone. So the person in the story that I told at the beginning, he experienced that when he began to laugh. And then the other type is narcolepsy without cataplexy, which is less common, and that's the type that I have, and the only main difference is that you don't experience cataplexy. So according to the National Institute of Neurological Disorders, there are 2 tests that must be performed in order to be diagnosed. The first is a polysomnogram, or a sleep study, and that just is an overnight test that records brain and muscle activity, as well as breathing and eye movement, and it helps determine if the person is going into REM sleep early, which is a side effect of narcolepsy, and helps rule out things such as sleep apnea. The second test is a multiple sleep latency test, and that is performed the day after the sleep study, and it occurs of taking 5 short naps throughout the day about every 2 hours, and if you fall asleep within like 8 minutes, it's a strong indication of excessive daytime sleepiness. And then it also helps to determine, like the other one, if you're going into REM sleep early. So if you fall asleep into REM sleep like 15 minutes after falling asleep, it's pretty much an indication that you have narcolepsy. I have had both tests done, and I can tell you they are not fun at all, like at all. So now that I've mentioned what it is and how it's diagnosed, I'll go into the different side effects that occur. So you've probably heard me mention excessive daytime sleepiness and cataplexy, and that's because those are the most prominent side effects of narcolepsy. Excessive daytime sleepiness was mentioned and explained well in Nature Reviews Neuroscience when it says that people with narcolepsy can feel rested when they wake up, but then after a few hours, they'll feel as tired as someone who stayed awake all night. And then a Sleep Science Journal 2017 also mentioned that excessive daytime sleepiness is usually accompanied by sleep attacks, which are abrupt, involuntary sleep episodes lasting anywhere from several seconds, or like a few seconds to several minutes. And excessive daytime sleepiness is usually most prevalent when doing like a habitual or monotonous routine like driving, or when doing something that requires full attention for a long amount of time, like studying or taking a test. And then the other main symptom is cataplexy, which, as I mentioned, is just like a sudden muscle weakness when experiencing intense emotion. And then There are also side effects that occur at night, which most people don't really know because when you see someone with narcolepsy, you usually just see them falling asleep during the day. But the National Institute of Neurological Disorders says that REM sleep is characterized by dreaming and muscle paralysis and usually occurs 60 to 90 minutes after falling asleep. But in people with narcolepsy, they go into REM sleep within like 15 minutes, so I could go take like a 20-minute nap and go into REM sleep right away. This also causes another problem, which is disturbed nocturnal sleep, which is the inability to sleep through the night. So, and according to the Sleep Science Journal in 2017, there's minimal research on disturbed nocturnal sleep, even though most people with narcolepsy experience it. There's also sleep paralysis, which during REM sleep, your muscles are paralyzed, so you don't act out your dreams. But in people with narcolepsy, the elements of REM sleep kind of get mixed into the elements of the wake cycle, and you can experience sleep paralysis when you're waking up. So today I've kind of ventured into the world of sleep disorders by discussing narcolepsy and examining how it's diagnosed and how it affects people's daily lives. Narcolepsy is an underdiagnosed thing that people continue to experience worldwide, and there are likely more people suffering with that don't even know about it because of the lack of research and clinical knowledge. So in that story I told you at the beginning, he had his life flipped upside down and he started to experience those symptoms. But he was eventually diagnosed. So even though the cause is still unknown and it can occur at any age, it's really important that further research is done, or any of us could become that guy someday.